Alright guys, it's Ryan Kane. Today we're going to be looking at a little technique I use quite often to help train your ears to find certain frequencies in a track. So without further ado, let's get to it. Before we get started, the reason why we're doing this is to be able to identify different frequencies in a track. When you're especially a beginner, you might find this really tricky. You might just know different elements and what you want to put in a track, but you're not too sure where they might fit on the audio spectrum, so you don't know whereabouts, if it's a mid type sound, a higher sound, you're not too sure. And this exercise will definitely help you understand different parts of the spectrum and what fits into your genre. Now that's very important in fact, because different genres will have different rules, I would say, of where different elements might be, and some genres might have a lot less in these areas, and some genres might have a lot more. Trance, for example, there's a lot of different overlapping instruments and different frequency ranges, and we're going to today identify where they are. One last thing, make sure you're wearing some decent headphones or using studio monitors for this. Earbuds or your laptop probably won't be able to decipher the lower frequency range sounds. Right guys, what you have to do first of all is get a reference track from your genre. So for example, my genre would be trance here. I've got a track by Vinny DeGeorge, Seascape, lovely track out on Alter Ego, very nice label. So what you're going to do is highlight a certain section where most of the elements are in play. So let's have a listen about here. Now what I need to do is get an EQ. Okay, so I'm using Pro Q3 here, it doesn't matter what EQ you use. I've added a very steep curve here, okay, on the cutoff on both the lower end and the higher end. This is useful because you can, it really cuts the frequency so you know where different parts are. So what we're going to do is try and identify different parts of the sound, okay? So the first place to look at is always the kick and bass. So let's see what frequency range that kick and bass is. To do this, I'm going to bring up the low cut until I feel the body of the kick and the sub bass is gone completely. And that'll give you a rough idea of where the kick and sub is. Right, so when you got to this point, I feel like all of the subs gone completely. Now the only bit you can hear really is the percussion-y sound of the kick left. The kick and bass pretty much ends at around 210 Hz. Now this is very interesting because a lot of people do hate this region here. Okay, so between 110 to 220, this region here, a lot of people will cut out completely. Well, not completely, but they'll do big dips in them, because around here to 500, 600 Hz, you can't use a lot of muddiness sound, okay, so too much energy going on in this area. Be very careful, because if you do dip out at this point, you might lose some of the energy from the kick. Let's take this one step further. Let's try and differentiate the kick and the sub bass here. So as soon as the offbeat sub bass goes, that should be able to tell you where there's non sub bass left. That's very interesting actually, because the sub bass is still present here at around this period. You do hear a lot of tracks with the sub bass, which is way down low between 60 and 100 Hz. Okay, so what I'm going to find, okay, there's a lovely pluck in this track. Have a listen, let's see if you can hear it. It goes like dun 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 dun. So let's have a look to see where the energy of that is. You can still hear it. See, it's around there. So if I bring this back around here, the energy is around here. So let's see what hertz is that, from 300 to about 500. 300 to about 500. Double check. Now, how this could be useful to you practically is you have to be very careful of how many different instruments attain at the same space. When it becomes around this area, you do get a lot of mud. So it's nice to try and be very careful of how much volume you do have or gain you have on certain instruments in this area. The pluck is happily sitting there. It has its own space and it loses a lot of energy when you take it out. So that's very interesting that the pluck's there. That's not always true, okay? Sometimes you will have a pluck with very little mid-range actually, or lower mid-range. You have a lot of plucks that just are more the high mid-range and higher frequencies. Right, here's the last example of a bit of training you could do. Now there might be a specific sound that stands out in a track, like really obviously. I've got a good example. I've got one of my old Tech Trance tracks called Solenoid. It has a really like screechy acidy synth in it, and it stands out quite a bit in the mix. So hopefully we can find where most of the energy of this sound is. It's still there. Found it. Let's go the other way. Most of it's there. Gone. So I'm pretty confident I know where it is. You probably guess where it is. Another giveaway is that in the spectrum there's a bit of a peak there. So I think I know where it is. Let's look. This is where it is. Right here. You still have a lot of the other energy in the sound a bit higher up, but the meat of it is there. But yeah guys, make sure to just try different sounds, different genres, different types of tempos, and have a little mess about. Honestly, don't underestimate how useful this tip is. It really does help you isolate different sounds and understand where they fit in the mix, okay? Honestly, I use this quite a bit. Hopefully this has been useful guys. Like the video, subscribe to the channel for more of these videos. Leave a comment on anything that you want to see in the future. Please don't whinge like people already have been. Just have a nice comment and I'll get back to you in time, okay? But until next time guys, see you later.